lately there's been a real stigma around lovers of Sarah J. Maas and those who more broadly love romantasy. It's an attitude which echoes that I've seen towards YA and, before that, towards fantasy. Despite the bookish community's reputation for inclusivity and open-minded thinking, I haven't failed to notice the undercurrent of snobbery. Nor have I been unaffected by it, feeling at times like I'm a lesser reader simply for enjoying certain books. I'm a Twilight fan, so being the girl with bad taste in literature is nothing new to me. But it's irritating that we're still having this conversation. I'm not saying any genre is above criticism, and while every genre has its gems, each can fall into the trap of being dominated by tropes or formulaic writing. Fantasy suffers from having too many chosen ones. Romances resort to love triangles. Dramas rely on the lost memory trope, and so on. If romantasy suffers from the overuse of certain ideas, it's not unique in this regard. I'll be the first to admit that many authors rely too heavily on copying Sarah J. Maas, and many readers are burned out on fae or fairies, which is a valid critique. I've also made a video discussing YA's flaws despite my enjoyment of YA. I think we should discuss the flaws inherent to every genre or type of story. The problem comes when we extend that judgment to readers themselves. I agree that people should read more widely, whether that means tackling the classics or diversifying their shelves. But at the end of the day, reading should also be fun. Moreover, the onus isn't on me to dictate what others should or shouldn't be reading. I don't get to call myself a better reader for having superior tastes. Mostly, I'm happy people are reading at all, because there are lessons to be learned from even the most frivolous or simplistic books. And I've done an essay on what I personally took away after reading ACOTAR. Reading ACOTAR isn't the same as reading Shakespeare, any more than eating chocolate is the same thing as eating carrots. But we shouldn't shame someone for enjoying chocolate. In fact, chocolate is healthy in the right doses. Both escapist fiction and chocolate contribute to your well-being, boosting happiness levels and allowing you to unwind. More to the point, the assertion that those who enjoy romantasy are less intelligent is especially problematic. For one thing, many romantasy readers enjoy a variety of books. For another, even within the genre, there are going to be good and bad books. Third, critical thinking, at least for me, doesn't boil down solely to what you read, but how you read it. If you're able to read a book and then produce a thoughtful essay on it, you're a critical thinker. If you did an essay on Berenstain Bears, you have my respect, because you're engaging with the work thoughtfully and using examples from the text to back up your statement. Whether you love or hate a book, your ability to offer a thorough review shows that you're intelligent. Still, let's get into the charges laid against romantasy and argue against them, or if there's truth to the claims, unpack that. There are 4 key issues readers take with the genre, some fair and some not. First, let's address the issue of reader intelligence. This is only my opinion, but my sense is that people who read, period, tend to be more intelligent, not less, regardless of the content consumed. If you're able to concentrate on a novel in lieu of social media and television, that's already a win. The fact that you're choosing Emily Henry over doom scrolling is powerful in itself. This isn't to say people who read ACOTAR are as intelligent as PhD students, but to say they're dumber, period, is both inaccurate and unfair. Moreover, the implication that you have to be this highly intelligent English major to qualify as a real reader or a booktuber worth listening to is extremely conceited. The beauty of books is that there are so many different kinds, all representing varying walks of life, storytelling techniques, and perspectives. There's no one kind of reader because there's no one kind of person. And to make a bookworm feel less welcome in this community because they're reading the wrong books is to lose sight of what makes a community great or what makes reading itself special. There's one creator I follow, and for the most part, I agree with her and enjoy her content. But she seems to have it out for ACOTAR. She tried reading the book and she hated it. And that's fair. But what got me was her response to a snobby comment one of her followers left. This follower said she wouldn't trust the reviews of anyone who had ACOTAR on their shelves. And the creator liked this comment, expressing her agreement. This almost prevented me from following this creator because it's such a condescending attitude to have and such a sweeping assumption about my character. Relegating my intelligence down to an enjoyment of a single book dismisses the fact that I read widely. I've enjoyed everything from Game of Thrones to Middlemarch. I read Les Mis in high school because I wanted to. And you're going to question my intelligence? You're going to say that my enjoyment of one novel makes me unqualified to critically review other titles or share my opinions on books within a community where people do just that? Frankly, I was insulted. I still follow the creator in question because I don't believe you have to wholly agree with someone to enjoy their work. And we agree on more than not. But that was a sticking point for me. They've had other takes I didn't agree with, but this was the only one which made me feel belittled and inspired me to do a whole rant video about snobbery in the BookTube community. This community should be open to all kinds of readers and all genres. You don't have to like everything, but you're not a better person or a smarter one because you read solely classical literature or meticulously track how diverse your reading is. That you're making the effort to expand your reading is commendable. But the choices you make, however honorable, don't entitle you to judging others. If you're tired of ACOTAR appearing in your feed, then the onus is on you to clean up your algorithm. There is no shortage of channels championing both classic lit and diverse books, with many creators paying particular attention to LGBTQ, Black, or Asian authors. I know because I follow those channels. I follow what I want to see, which includes a blend of romantasy, fantasy, classic lit, and diversity. And you must do the same. We all hope readers can learn to read outside their comfort zone. But if they're off in fairy, gushing about hot and dangerous fayboys, and arguing about what a jerk Tamlin is, it's not for you to judge them. Let them do their thing and concentrate on doing yours. Because what's most important is what you're reading. You get to choose what you read and what creators you follow. And you can do that without sounding like a condescending professor. This is the most wild claim I've heard. I understand what the creator was trying to say with this statement, and I commend the booktuber for their boldness in making it. But I have to disagree. Despite my supposed lack of intelligence, I'm going to critically think about this argument and why I strongly disagree with it. First off, what I think the creator who made this assertion was trying to say was that the book was heteronormative. It follows predominantly white, straight characters, and in many ways the story is a familiar one. It doesn't take risks, and what little representation it has is spotty. That's a fair argument to make. I love ACOTAR, but I can't pretend it's reinvented the wheel. Overall, it still functions like hundreds of safe YA novels I've already read. And if by conservative the creator meant that it fails to challenge the status quo, then again I concede that point. Still, the use of the word conservative was a weird one for me. If you wanted to assert that Twilight was conservative, I'd agree. I love Twilight, but the majority of its cast is white, with non-white characters being portrayed inaccurately and gay people seemingly not existing. To say that ACOTAR is conservative, though, is kind of wild to me, because in my opinion, it's anything but. It follows a similar formula to Twilight, but it includes all the elements the conservative Twilight shied away from, like graphic sex, LGBT characters, and even conversations around consent and patriarchal power. It's not perfect, but it's worth noting that the actual conservatives want to ban the book. ACOTAR offends conservative sensibilities with its loud sexuality, among other things. In another video, I talk about what I personally took from the book as a woman who is left-leaning. There are scenes where the protagonists take contraceptive potions. When it comes to imprinting, Sarah J. Maas actually explores the implications of the trope, including why it could be toxic. Some couples who imprint end up hating each other. While in the case of Elaine and Lucian, she says no to the latter, making the point that imprinting on someone doesn't entitle you to being with them. I'm sure there are many things ACOTAR could have handled better, but to call it conservative seems like an inaccuracy. Granted, I'm sure there are many conservative women who read Romantasy because it's fun and escapist, and they don't have to think a lot. But I'd be willing to bet there are plenty of liberals reading the books too, especially on BookTok, where the books overall are left-leaning. All I'm saying is that there's more here to offend conservative sensibilities than not. So while ACOTAR might be imperfect by liberal standards, a truly conservative book wouldn't be repeatedly challenged by conservatives. This is the one critique I can agree with. Romantasy borrows this trend from YA, wherein the male love interests frequently display behavior that would be seen as unhealthy at best and dangerous at worst, if seen in real life. While I've made the argument that readers should be able to distinguish reality from fiction, and therefore not treat romance novels as a blueprint for their own lives, the prevalence of this trope, if you can call it that, is an unusual one. I don't believe writing problematic relationships is necessarily harmful in the literal sense, especially if you're an adult or are making an effort to talk to your kids when they're reading books like Twilight or Shatter Me. But I can see why the sheer volume of toxic romances would be off-putting. While these kinds of relationships can be entertaining, they're frustrating for readers who are looking for wholesome relationships or romances built on friendship and respect. Problematic or not, toxic relationships are overdone. They're overly represented in romance as a whole, trickling down to YA and romantasy, and they can contribute to normalizing poor behaviors. Authors should still be able to write these kinds of romances, but their books should be labeled as dark romance if that's what readers are looking for, or if we need a better term, gray romance, since these relationships tend not to be as extreme as those seen in true dark romances. Personally, I'm not a fan of dark romances, but I've enjoyed many gray romances. I just made the term up, but I think it's a fitting one. Many readers enjoy gray romances, and that's valid, but many readers do not, and there should be books for them too. When the majority of straight-up romance or romantasy is gray, then the frustrations people have with the genre are understandable. Authors could mitigate this not only through labeling their books differently, but by having their protagonists break up with these bad boys, or by avoiding the label of romance altogether. Many don't consider Jane Eyre to be a romance, for example, labeling it instead as a gothic. Rochester can behave badly, and his relationship with Jane can be entertaining as long as we don't categorize it as a healthy romance, because Gothic literature is very different from, say, Emily Henry, and conflating the two leads to these kinds of frustrations. Twilight kicked off the trend of essentially marrying the two genres, bringing the broody Rochester into the same room as Emily Henry. And in a previous video, I argued that Twilight functions better if it's classified instead as a Gothic novel rather than as a romance. Again, I like gray romance, but there needs to be more distinction between the two. We need more novels, particularly mainstream ones, which center on healthy relationships, and romances built on wholesome friendships rather than the usual enemies to lovers trope. Along with the toxic relationships, this assertion isn't wholly inaccurate. Romantasy suffers from the same problems which plague YA. It's increasingly reliant on tropes to generate sales. The bestsellers frequently chase trends, their books blatantly borrowing from Sarah J. Maas, and in many ways, they play it safe. Few romantasy novels break the rules or surprise readers. Overwhelmingly, they are predictable, to some extent, because they have to be. You know who is going to end up with who, and half the fun is how. If an author said, surprise, and had the pair break up in the end, it wouldn't be a romance novel. Still, I would also like to see more innovation in the genre, because the potential is there. I liked Twilight because it didn't feel like Meyer was chasing trends. She wrote the book she wanted to, and her book feels less original now because everyone copied her. People took the template she made, creating YA and romantasy as we now know it. But the people trying to copy Stephenie Meyer or Sarah J. Maas make the same mistake as fantasy authors who try to copy Tolkien. When Lord of the Rings came out, it was wholly unique, but thousands of writers copied Tolkien and have been unable to completely break the paradigm since. Likewise, romantasy authors can't help sounding like Stephenie Meyer or Sarah J. Maas. That's not to say writers shouldn't take inspiration from Maas if they genuinely love her work. But in a world where books must be rapidly marketed to strict demographics through the use of familiar tropes and pretty faces, there's less room for experimentation. Romantasy should simply mean romance mixed with fantasy. But there are a whole slew of expectations that come with the label. Even the expectation that the male love interest be morally gray in some respect, leading to all these toxic relationships, is one imposed on authors. I don't think all romantasy is badly written, because there are good romantasy books. You can't label any genre as being wholly badly written, but many romantasy books are predictable and cliche, leading to burnout on the part of readers, including those who may otherwise love the genre. You'll see lots of people say they like romance in novels, but hate the romance genre, likely because romances in other genres aren't beholden to those rules, which make purely romantic fiction insufferable for so many. Some of the strongest romances in fantasy have come out of books which weren't romantasies, with examples including Harry and Ginny, Vin and Elend, or Arwen and Aragorn. If romantasy is going to escape the stigma it's developed, authors and publishers can help by encouraging more creativity within the genre. When fantasy grew stale, featuring too many chosen one farm boys and damsels in distress, it innovated, and romantasy must do the same. Having unpacked the charges leveled against romantasy, where I disagreed or supported the assertions made, I do want to take a closer look at why people spurn romantasy as a whole, beyond its actual problems. It hasn't escaped my notice that the majority of books which are maligned are written by women. Male and female authors are harshly criticized for their writing or as people, but the nastiest commentary is still reserved mostly for female writers or readers. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, you don't see books for men or male interests treated as a joke. Overall, we deride most that which is for or by women, and this isn't anything new. Back in the 1800s, the view was that novels, especially those written for women, like romances, rotted the brain. Authors like Anne Radcliffe or the Bronte sisters were seen as problematic for challenging the status quo. Now, women who write romantasy or read it are accused of ruining fantasy. Personally, I think there's space for both fantasy and romantasy to coexist, especially now they've been given their own distinctions. I agree that Mistborn and ACOTAR should be separated, and that they're trying to do different things and reach different audiences, but there's no reason for one to undermine the other. In fairness, publishing has put too much of an emphasis on romantasy, marketing it to the exclusion of much else, which I'll address in my next point. But I don't think the existence of romantasy or its emergence as a new genre or type of fantasy has to mean the end of fantasy as we know it. While publishers should be marketing their genres more broadly, the assertion that Sarah J. Maas has destroyed fantasy fails to take into account the many high fantasy writers still working. Brandon Sanderson, John Gwynne, and Joe Abercrombie continue to produce work loved by fantasy fans. Last I checked, Tad Williams and Robin Hobb are still writing. High fantasy hasn't gone anywhere. New subgenres appear within fantasy all the time, and romantasy is just the latest one, like dark fantasy, urban fantasy, and cozy fantasy, all of which continue to flourish and coexist alongside more traditional fantasy stories. It might mean readers have to look harder, but I'm tired of work by women being treated as something inferior, which brings the rest down. To hear some people talk, Sarah J. Maas and her readership are a plague on the genre, And how insulting is that? If you say a Romantasy reader isn't a true fantasy fan, then you might as well say readers of the Dresden Files or Legends and Lattes aren't true fans either, for their enjoyment of urban fantasy and cozy fantasy respectively. The beauty of the fantasy genre, like reading as a whole, is that it can be a lot of different things, and that diversity in taste should be celebrated. Blaming Sarah J. Maas for ruining your genre because her books don't specifically cater to your tastes is the worst kind of snobbery. There is no shortage of high fantasy novels being written, but it's still popular to turn women's fiction into a joke, and I'm over it. Part of it could be down to the fact that the majority of fiction lately has been written by women, which is a victory for us, but the condescension with which more feminine literature is viewed will never not be toxic to me. And it's something I've ranted about in an older video. Perhaps the real culprit isn't Romantasy at all, but the way it has taken over the conversation. BookTok is practically useless if you enjoy any genres that aren't fantasy, romance, YA, or some combination of all three. Many readers gave up on the popular books because they weren't to their taste. If there's a large audience saying popular books are bad, it's not because those books are bad. It's because they can't find books which are more to their tastes. In pushing Romantasy and YA, publishers cater only to a specific demographic, leaving other readers out in the cold. The alienation many feel for Romantasy or ACOTAR is understandable, because in bookish spaces, which should be for readers of all kinds, they dominate the discussion. When 60% of bookish content is about why Tamlin is a jerk, you are automatically excluded from the community as a whole. When I was on BookTok, I felt frustrated by the seeming inability to discuss books which weren't ACOTAR or Shatter Me. The underlying feeling was that if you didn't like ACOTAR, your opinion didn't count. If you weren't reading the cool books, then you might as well shut up, because that's all anyone seemed interested in discussing. A bookish community where you can only talk about a handful of authors and a few genres grows stale fast. So it's not surprising that a dissenting opinion took the forefront. I'm an ACOTAR fan, and I was burnt out on the discourse surrounding it. I ultimately left BookTok because a community where I was only allowed to talk about the same book over and over again wasn't much of a community to me. BookTube, at least for me, seems more balanced. I've been able to find creators covering a range of books, from classic literature to high fantasy. Whether you read mysteries, classics, fantasy, romance, or even pulp horror, there's a creator for you. And there are plenty of booktubers too who read a bit of everything, covering nonfiction and science fiction in the same video. That said, the algorithm often pushes readers towards Romantasy content, which has likely contributed to this idea that Romantasy has killed fantasy. High fantasy novels are still being written, but because publishers and social media sites aren't pushing them as much, it's led to casual readers thinking they're not there. It's caused readers of other genres to feel excluded from the bookish community. And so in being told they have to discuss ACOTAR, they do so in a negative light, venting their frustrations out on the book and the readers which have monopolized the space. If Romantasy is going to be respected as a genre, it has to be respectful in turn. On BookTok especially, room has to be made for all kinds of readers. People like me are attacked for liking ACOTAR because we didn't know when to shut the hell up. ACOTAR fans dominated the conversation, so now people are fighting back. The assertion that Romantasy is bad, whether in its readership or its quality, is a harsh one, but not entirely unfounded. At the end of the day, all readers should be welcome, including those of us who enjoy Romantasy, while readers should be encouraged to expand their tastes, diversifying their bookshelves or exploring the classics. We all deserve our comfort reads. We're all entitled to our guilty pleasures, and readers, especially women, shouldn't be shamed or have our intelligence questioned because we happen to like a popular book. Snobbery within bookish spaces is nothing new, nor is the derision towards more feminine novels. But that's what makes it so exhausting. This space should be welcoming, inclusive, and fun. But 200 years later, an underlying condescension remains, and blanket statements continue to be made about readers like me, as if we can all be tucked into perfect boxes like high fantasy readers or romantasy readers, without allowance for those of us who might be both and more. At the same time, romantasy has dominated the conversation, whether through increasingly homogenized writing and the proliferation of certain tropes like the bad boy, or it's being marketed to the exclusion of all else. It's easy to see why romantasy has become a target. The more publishers shun other books, genres, and voices aside, the more resentful readers will become, which will ultimately hurt not only those being overshadowed, but those of us with an earnest enthusiasm for the genre who will increasingly find ourselves in a hostile environment. In playing favorites, publishers have inadvertently created tensions within the bookish community. In the end, only they have the power to address these problems. Readers can encourage them to an extent, but not through shaming each other or declaring ourselves superior to other readers. Like every other genre, romantasy deserves a place at the table. And romantasy readers shouldn't be shamed for expressing passion on behalf of the books we love. But we should acknowledge there are flaws within our favorite genres, especially on a writing level, and that our being respected within the bookish community is contingent on us allowing other genres to flourish too. I'm not less intelligent because I read ACOTAR, and women aren't bringing fantasy down. But I am selfish if I can't recognize that nonstop discussions of Tamlin risk alienating other readers who likewise deserve to talk about the books they love. Thank you for watching, and happy reading!